um, with that, I'm going to turn it over to the program administrator, Kelly Green, and she will be covering the agenda today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for getting up early on this beautiful summer day. I noticed this week that the days are actually getting shorter now. The weather's cooled off and the days are getting shorter, and it's time to bust out the pumpkin spiced everything. So moving right along into fall soon. Thank you for being here. I'm just going to give a quick overview of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. I see we have about 30 outside folks, it looks like, which is great. It's more people than we've had during the in-person public hearing. So I think this virtual mode is working well for us. I'm going to give an overview, and then I'm going to turn it over to some of my staff, and they're going to actually go through the formal public hearing. After I do a brief overview, if anybody has questions, that would be the time to ask them. And then during the actual public hearing event, that's a time for official comment onto the public hearing record. So we're here for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which is a fund that was created in 1987. It's a partnership between EPA and the states. Every year we receive a capitalization grant from EPA, and we are required as a state to match that grant with 20% state matching funds. This year, our grant from EPA is about $68 million, just over $68 million. And excuse me, what happens is the state match and the capitalization grant, along with loan repayments, are what are used to then send out and finance new loans that are coming into our program. This is, like I said, a low interest loan program. You'll hear in the public hearing, our interest rate this year is 1.87% for 20-year projects. This year, the program also hit a new mark. We financed 5 billion projects earlier this year, so that's something that I think we should all be proud of as a state and as a department. In the Clean Water program, we can finance projects that are related to wastewater treatment improvements or stormwater treatment improvements, things that address non-point source, things that address water quality improvement projects. We're here to talk about the intended use plan during the public hearing, and the intended use plan is our document that we put out annually. And the intended use plan is an overview of how we're allocating the funds in any given year. And it also lists the projects that have applied for funds in that given year. This year, because our fundable range was greater than the amount of projects that we have coming into the program, the draft intended use plan does not have the projects scored yet. The final intended use plan will have all the projects actually ranked and scored. However, in the intent to try and get all of the information out to the public as soon as possible, we forego scoring those projects early on in the process, since we knew everybody was going to be in the fundable range. In the past couple of years, the EPA has put a requirement for principal forgiveness, or what they refer to as additional subsidization, related to these grants. Michigan chooses to use additional subsidization in the form of principal forgiveness. So a lot of you are familiar. Principal forgiveness is basically a grant. It's a portion of your loan that you do not have to repay back. This year, there's a requirement from the capitalization grant that Michigan must apply a minimum of 10% of the capitalization grant as principal forgiveness. And this is about $6.8 million. There's also a requirement as part of the Clean Water Act that states are required to apply 0 to 30% of the capitalization grant as additional subsidy or principal forgiveness. So this year, if we put the total of those two together, we are applying about just over $22 million in principal forgiveness. Something that everybody probably is aware of, that, but I should note, the principal forgiveness goes out to the communities. It doesn't revolve back into the fund. So we have to judge providing enough incentive for folks to come into the program, with the principal forgiveness, but also be aware that that money doesn't come back and revolve into the program. So that's a high-level overview, and I can go ahead and open it up now to questions. If anybody has any questions, if you are on the Teams, you can raise your hand, and then, as Matt said, I think it looks like there might be some folks that called in, which I don't think you have the ability to raise your hand, but you can go ahead and speak.
You actually can, if you're calling in on the phone, I believe you can do *9 to raise your hand, and then *6 to mute or to unmute your phone. And just a reminder, if you're not staff speaking today, if you could please mute your cameras, turn your video off, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
So just going through the list. Yes, it looks like Sylvia, I believe. Did you have a question or comment?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Are you able to hear me? Okay, thank you.
I am.
Yeah, yes. I got a notice on the Teams when I was calling in or logging in that I couldn't get volume to the computer, so I had to use my phone for volume.
Okay.
So, so I'm one of the callers. So thank you very much for this overview of this hearing too. I think what I'm mostly calling in with today is concern about, obviously concern that many of us are having about what's happening with the state of so much infrastructure need across the state, but in Detroit particularly where I live. We've all been paying close attention to the work that's been happening in Flint and know very much the significant dangers of lead in drinking water and in our clean water sources. And we want to figure out how EGLE in particular, especially through the administration of these funds, can help us better be able to inform residents and ensure that we've got the protections in place that are necessary when the water operators are submitting their applications for state revolving fund loans. So I should tell you, I'm an organizer with People's Water Board and with Michigan Welfare Rights Organization. And through Michigan Welfare Rights Organization, I'm also co-chair of EPA's National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And so I actually had the benefit of getting on the phone yesterday with Administrator Wheeler, and we had a national teleconference. And so learning that he's from Ohio. And so one of the things that we are going to be following up with him very soon on is a plan that he ejected around national infrastructure and impacts, especially low-income and vulnerable communities. And so I'm hoping that that might be something also that EGLE takes a closer look at, because some of the things that are in there very much are about our experience with Michigan. But specific to like what it is that you all are going to be reviewing with the applications for these funds, we're right now at least trying to better understand what is happening with DWSD in particular, and concerns that we have about the lack of transparency with the information that is provided to EGLE, and even some of the struggles that we've had with our colleagues over at NRDC to try to better understand how to get access to applications, how to find the information that are supposedly supplied through the SRF funds, that also tie back to the hearings that are supposed to be happening in the communities. So I can tell you, I go to, well, before COVID, obviously, I went to as many of the DWSD hearings as possible to provide comments, especially in the work that they're doing around infrastructure and how it's going to be financed, how it is going to be applied back to ratepayers so that we understand how that's going to affect bills. As you know, Detroit has experienced many years of shutoffs for residents who are unable to afford bills. And we're very much advocates of being qualified for more principal forgiveness on the loans, but we believe that there's more that residents need to know about how it is that these loans, how the asset management plans, and generally the operations for how does the the water operators are determining that what additional bonds are going to be needed, or how they, again, apply those costs over to customer bills. And then just lastly, one issue that we're finding, again, which also ties in with this, is that in one of the infrastructure projects that DWSD is working on the east side of Detroit, in District 4 in particular, they issued drinking water pitchers to residents as they're doing water main and sewer line replacements. And the pitchers that they gave out, we've learned from a local engineer, that they also are not rated for lead. But residents don't know that, and we've even gone around into neighborhoods and have talked to residents. And one woman in particular told us, "Well, I never drink DWSD water. I just don't trust it, and I didn't even use the filter because I didn't see what was the point, since I buy bottled water." And she's like, "But for my dog, I am boiling the water," right? And so, out of the one of the main things we learned out of Flint is never boil that water, right? If it's got lead, because you're just going to make it worse. So I say all this because I think there's still a lack of transparency, even accountability, lack of information that DWSD in particular has given to residents. We've got a lot of concerns with GLEWA as well. And we've been talking to folks that we know over in Benton Harbor, one person in Kalamazoo, and we know that a lot of people just feeling that they don't have the information that they know they need to know as consumers of these systems, and what it is that the state is doing to ensure that we can get that information through these application processes to ensure that we are safe, knowledgeable, and that we can be protected through consumer laws as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. I can share a little bit about our process on our end, and there is some challenges with the legislation. So we are governed by both the federal legislation for the revolving loan funds and then our state legislation. And the state legislation for the clean water programs, which when we refer to clean water programs, we're referring to wastewater and stormwater. That legislation at the state level was written quite a few years ago, and it has not evolved. And while it does speak to local public participation and local transparency, and this is my opinion, it hasn't evolved to the point where we are today, where we can use mechanisms like putting things online, or sending out brochures even, or sending out emails at the local level. There is a minimum requirement for local communities to hold a local public hearing on their project before they even start the application process with us here at the state. And it sounds like your concerns might be at that level first, and maybe we have been working with our stakeholders to try and make improvements to that state legislation process, and public participation is one of those that are on the list of items that we should look at and improve. So your comments are valid, and I hear them and recognize them, and I agree that there probably should be some additional mechanism in place at the local level for local participation before it even gets to the EGLE level. Once a project plan comes into our department, we review it based on what we are reviewing that's in the legislation, what's spelled out in the legislation. And then we will do an environmental assessment on that project, which includes environmental factors. It also includes socioeconomic factors. We look at the cost of the project, and then we will write an environmental document that is posted on our website. We send it out to any applicable parties that we are aware of that are interested in that particular project. If folks have participated in the local hearing, and we have a list of those folks, we will send it out to those folks. So that's also a time for the public to comment on the particular projects. There's a 30-day public comment period from that environmental assessment, meaning the community cannot start construction or break ground until that public comment period has expired. So that's another way that EGLE initiates a public participation process too.
Okay, well, I know I've signed into many of those. I'm sorry, just one final thing. I know that I sign in every time to those meetings because they now required it. There's always DWSD staff there. I've never gotten any kind of communication back from DWSD or from Eagle, and so I'm wondering how it is that you're even getting access to those sign-in sheets, because I know that that's also part of the application requirements.
Yeah, the sign-in sheets are provided by the local applicant. So they are required to give us a verbatim transcript of the public hearing and also a list of those attendees at that public hearing. So if you signed in there with your name, address, email address, etc., I'm assuming that that information has been passed along to us and should be in our records. And you should expect, at least moving forward, and I can double check this with our project manager that works on the Detroit area projects to make sure that your name is on that list and your contact information, and we can send you that environmental assessment when it comes time to do that.
Thank you. And how would I go about getting a copy of what is submitted to you by DWSD in the sign-in sheets and also the transcript?
So the actual project plan is quite a large document, and those documents are not housed online at Eagle's website simply because, one, we just don't have the space to house those documents. Typically, we advise the applicant to get those documents through the local municipality. The local municipality has those documents. They are the owner of those documents, and they should be able to provide you that document. They also are required to provide that document prior to the public hearing, the local public hearing taking place. A lot of communities will put the document either at their library, they'll put it on their website sometimes if they have enough room on their website to do that. So I would suggest reaching out to the applicant, whether it's DWSD or Great Lakes Water Authority in this situation, and ask for that document. It is a public document, so you can do a FOIA request and get that document from us at Eagle as well. And then I'll also point out our website, which is on the screen right now, michigan.gov/CWSRF. That will bring you to the CWSRF website. And if you navigate through that, there is also a list of all the recent environmental assessments that we have written. So once we get to the process of writing those environmental assessments, those are all published online as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like, Cindy, you have your hand up?
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. I'm going to turn my camera off because it's messed up. Yes, so thank you for all of that, Kelly, and for attempting to respond to a lot of the questions that have come up, in particular at the local level. I 100% agree with what Sylvia has just stated. And I had a few follow-up questions just based on the back and forth. You and I had a couple of email exchanges, but then also just now you talked about you're working with stakeholders on improving the process. And I'm just curious first who the stakeholders are, and if there's a way for community groups like People's Water Board Coalition, Michigan Welfare Rights to be part of that stakeholder process, since there's so much at stake for those residents?
Yeah, so so this actually has been my passion for the past few years, is trying to get the legislation changed in these programs. Because like I said, they haven't evolved over time, and it was set up at a time where there were different priorities in the state. There were different infrastructure priorities in the state than what there are now. The department has a number of priorities when it comes to legislation. So we have reached out to some of our stakeholders. Michigan Water Environment Association, MWEA, is taking a look at the legislation right now. And I believe MEC, Michigan Environmental Council, is also helping us take a look at the legislation right now. And Cindy, I think you might be familiar with some of the folks in those organizations. But
absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Is there, I guess, to just put a finer point on it, I think it's really important that the community members who are most impacted by decisions that are made through the SRF be a part of that review process. And also, to some other questions that I have, or comments quickly on the SRF implementation is I think there needs to be a lot more education so that community members and others in the public understand how this process works. For instance, I know one of the concerns that we've raised is the fact that we attended, several of us on this call attended the June 19th, 2019 public hearing that Detroit Water and Sewerage Department had on their, what they said was the FY 2020 SRF application. And what I learned through you, and I appreciate the context, is that that was actually on the entire 5-year plan, as I understand it, even though it was publicized as the SRF 2020 application. So they now, as I understand it, do not have to have another hearing unless they come back with a dramatically revised project plan or with a new proposal or new project. So that wasn't something that was made clear, at least to me, during that hearing and subsequently until I started looking at this year's intended use plan. These are things that I think are critical for the public to know. There were a lot of concerns and objections raised that night by public members of the public. I'm assuming those are in the transcript and the record. But immediately following that hearing, the vote was taken to basically approve the project and for it to move forward. So some of the points that Sylvia's raised about the ability for the public to engage locally, to access documents, to access asset management plans, to access the framework around which the groups are, these decisions are being made. None of that is apparent, and yet the financial, implications of decisions that are being made tie back to the most disproportionately impacted residents on their water bills or on other aspects of financial financial pieces that residents are having to carry the burden of.
Yeah, and just to speak a little bit to the public plan process in that 5-year window, excuse me, and the 5-year window, and I don't know if it was, I'm not intricately involved in all the details of every project that comes in, so I don't know if it was DWSD's intent to do a 5-year project at that time, or if their intent was to do a single 1-year project at that time and then something came up. Oftentimes that's what happens is a project will, or a community will think that they're moving forward with their project, and then something will come up and it will change their priorities, or it will change the amount of work they can do that they originally thought they could do in that project. So we've allowed that 5-year window because that initial project plan document is so extensive and so time consuming and expensive to put together, that as long as there's not any type of significant change, either a change in the site, a change in the if it's a treatment process, a change in the treatment process, or a significant dollar amount change, we allow that 5-year window so that the community doesn't have to go through that project planning process all over again. Like I said, because it is so time consuming and expensive. So that's why that 5-year window exists. That being said, again, if the legislation changes and we are able to use different types of documents and not just that project plan document that's spelled out in the legislation right now, if we are allowed to use documents that a community might already exist or might already have, like a capital improvement plan or an asset management plan, we might have to tweak that 5-year window again and say, if you didn't do your project in year 1, you do have to go through the public participation process again. So that is, again, something that we may be able to look at changes with the SRF legislation.
Okay, thank you. I have just 2 final points. One is, can we get a commitment to ensure that community groups like People's Water Board Coalition are part of the stakeholder process formally?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the person that can say that. I definitely will pass it up the chain. And I know that this administration, and we're very committed to reaching out to the stakeholder group. I will say we did go through a process improvement when we looked at the legislation changes, it's been almost 3 years now, and we did have a stakeholder process there, and we did have meetings across the state. I think we had 4 or 5 different meetings across the state at that time, and we tried to involve as many parties as we thought we could. Like I said, that was 3 years ago now, though, or 4 years ago at this point. So I will definitely work with my management to see how we can involve more stakeholders in the process right now, too.
Okay, great. Final question that I have is related to the socioeconomic factors that are reviewed in the project plan. Are those applied to the specific area in which the project is being conducted, or is it done on a community-wide basis so that the socio-demographics of the entire community are taken into consideration versus the neighborhood or the specific area?
You're picking out all the, we're on the same page, and I like that because you're picking out all of the things in the legislation that I don't like right now. So we look at the project service area typically when we're doing our environmental review, which includes the socioeconomic impacts. So we're looking at the area served by that particular project, but we also have to look at the actual customer base that's paying for the project, essentially, and the ratepayers that are paying for that project. When we determine our disadvantaged community status, we are oftentimes using Census Bureau information, and as you know, census tract information doesn't necessarily overlay and correspond with system information or project service area information. So that's another area in our state legislation that we're looking to tweak so that we can better understand the project might be serving this particular neighborhood, who's paying for the project, and what's the socioeconomic factors in that particular neighborhood, as opposed to, especially in Southeast Michigan, as opposed to maybe the entire Great Lakes Water Authority boundary.
Great. Thank you, Kelly.
Sure, Cindy. It looks like Laura Rubin, you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for providing this opportunity. I am the director of the Healing Our Waters Great Lakes Coalition and was previously with the Huron River Watershed Council. And so I want to echo the comments from Sylvia and Cindy, because public engagement is I think my experience, at least with the state revolving loan funds, is there needs to be more intentional public engagement on these issues. So I won't say more because that's been covered. The other question, though, that I had that hasn't been brought up is I'm wondering what kind of capacity and coordination there is between your staff and the regulatory side of things. So I'm familiar that many of the successful applicants for these funds are well-resourced communities that have the ability to put together these plans and implement them. What I'm more concerned about is some of the lower income and disadvantaged communities that don't have those resources to put together the plans, to participate in this process and secure funds. And so I'm wondering how much staff capacity you have to do proactive outreach to some of these disadvantaged communities, and or coordination with some of the regulatory staff of where there's need, so that there's some coordination between some of the permitting staff to say these communities are in violation of their permits, close to violations. Is there some outreach that you all can provide to encourage them to come forth and submit proposals?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great point. We do work closely with the regulatory folks in Eagle, and we have educated those folks on the resources that we have. Oftentimes I get emails and correspondence from them. What do you have? I have this community. They're in rough shape. They don't have a lot of finances. What can we do for them? So we do work closely with both the clean water side, the wastewater side, and the drinking water side with our regulatory folks. I know that we have had interest when a regulator will go out and do an inspection and they find something that might be approaching failure or is at the failure point. We have funded projects through that word of mouth that way. I do think that they're probably, we don't know what we don't know here. So when there are communities, we work with our partners at Rural Water also and our partners at USDA Rural Development. And a lot of those smaller communities will take their needs to USDA Rural Development for financing. They have a program similar to ours. And oftentimes communities can get better deals, if you will. They can get more grant money from rural development than they can with us. So we do partner that way. We do communicate with the consulting world as well. So we have quarterly meetings with ACEC, I think is the name of them. So the consultants also do a lot of marketing for us as well. But again, like I said, we don't know what we don't know. So if there are communities out there that we're not reaching, and somebody is aware of that, then by all means, we'd be open to having a conversation about how we can better reach them.
Like your meetings with ACEC, would it be possible to establish some kind of regular meeting with some of the community groups or NGOs?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. If we want to work and sit down and maybe have some type of quarterly discussion on what the needs are out there and how we can address them if we can. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think I see. It looks like Charlotte, do you have a question?
Yeah, just quickly. It looks like the full that we could be providing more principal forgiveness than what is being suggested in the IUP, and I'm curious if I'm reading that right, and also what the decision was to sort of not maximize the full amount of allowable principal forgiveness.
So there's a couple of factors that go into this, and know that I'm looking at it on my other screen, so I'm looking that direction too, the principal forgiveness amounts. This is the draft IUP. So we have to manage the amount of principal forgiveness that's required in those two different pots, if you will, from EPA, or the two different requirements. What oftentimes will happen is the projects that are listed on the draft IUP are estimates at the very early stages of a project. And then what will occur is as the project evolves, and it takes about a year for that project to, or for the local community to produce plans and specifications suitable for bidding, they'll go out for bid, and oftentimes the actual cost of the project will come in higher than what they estimated at the beginning. So at the beginning of the year, when we do our draft IUP, we leave ourselves a little bit of room there so that we can adjust those final principal forgiveness amounts upwards if we need to, if projects are coming in higher than what they originally estimated. So we give us a little bit of cushion there. I think the other thing that the department looked at this year was we have dramatically increased the amount of principal forgiveness on the clean water side in the past 2 years compared to where we were in years past. So we wanted to kind of make a gradual increase going up, because we don't want to increase the principal forgiveness all the way to the max and then not have enough money looking forward to be able to fund all of the projects and all of the needs that are out there, because we know that the needs that are out there are much greater than the actual needs that are coming into our program. Mm-hmm. So we have to kind of do a balancing act and look 5, 10, 15 years into the future and say, if we do X amount of principal forgiveness, what does that mean 5 years down the road? What does that mean 10 years down the road? Because that money is not coming back into the program. So yeah, we have increased it dramatically. I am glad that we are closer to our max cap available. And I anticipate as things move forward that total subsidy being provided will increase.
Got it. Thank you. And then one other super quick question. So I know in the IUP, you've got the breakdown of the sort of percentage of principal forgiveness across the projects. And it's set 24% for all of them, and then 5% for all of the Green Project Reserve. And I'm curious, I mean, I don't know. It seems out of fairness, like you'd want to have it be the same amount of percentage for each project. But I'm curious if that was sort of the rationale, or if the department has the ability to provide a greater percentage of principal forgiveness to a particular project and a lower amount to another project, if that's within your control to vary those percentage.
When we're speaking about disadvantaged communities, we can't rank one disadvantaged community higher than another disadvantaged community. That's not, our legislation basically doesn't allow for that. So basically we looked at it and we assumed one disadvantaged community was the same as another disadvantaged community, so we would allocate the same percent to those communities. We did feel that it was more important to give a higher amount of principal forgiveness, or a higher percentage of principal forgiveness, to those disadvantaged communities rather than just to the projects that were doing green projects. So that's where we ended up with the higher 24% for the disadvantaged and the 5% for green.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, scrolling through here. I don't see any more hands raised that I see. Let me just take a double check through the chat. All right, if there are no additional questions for me, why don't we, if everybody's okay, why don't we just, because we're already at 9:30, 9:40, can we just take maybe like a 5-minute break? We'll come back at 9:42, and then we will go ahead and get started with the official public hearing. Okay, and then Mark, I think you'll kick it off at 9:42.
Good morning, sir. That's
Hey, Barry, could we ask you to mute your camera, please?
yes, sir.
Thank you.
861-6580. 2823.
All right. Thanks for affording me that short break. My dogs were driving me crazy, and I had to go let them out the door. It's garbage day today, so the garbage men were coming by, and of course, right in the middle of the session. So the dogs were driving me nuts. But Matt, do you want to just go over quickly the housekeeping rules again, and then I will turn it over after that to Mark Conradi, who is one of our financial specialists, and he will kick off the public hearing officially.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. My name is Matt Tomlinson. I'm with Eagles Environmental Support Division, and just going to go over some housekeeping issues. We've had some additional people join since this meeting started. And so this title slide, if you're not presenting, we ask you that you please turn your cameras off as well as mute your microphones. And let me get here to my next slide. You're welcome to make comments, but I don't believe staff will be responding back to those comments. So if you just want to hover over your screen and kind of give an idea on this Microsoft Teams platform, you'll notice the camera and the microphone icons. And then if you go to the middle of that menu, there's 3 dots, and that'll give you some additional options, your device settings for sound, as well as if you're interested in turning on the live captions, you can do that as well. So with that, don't really have any additional because I don't believe they'll be responding to questions during the public hearing. So I'm going to turn that over to Mark Conradi.
Hello, everyone. Again, thank you for joining us virtually for the public hearing regarding the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. The hearing will now come to order. My name is Mark Conradi, and I will serve as the hearing officer for the fiscal year 2021 draft Clean Water State Revolving Fund intended use plan. With me today is another Eagle staff member who will be assisting with this hearing. Carol Patton of the Water Infrastructure Financing section will provide an overview of the prioritization process and the intended use plan relating to the draft fiscal year 2021 project priority list. Hearing agenda. To describe how we will proceed this morning, I will begin with some background information about why we are here today. I will then describe the purpose of the hearing and how your comments will be used. Following that, I will outline the procedures under which we will take your comments and then describe what will happen after today's hearing. It will then be your time to provide comments. Eagle will spend time today listening to those comments. At the end of the hearing, I will provide a short summary and closing. Background information. By way of background information, the Water Infrastructure section of the Finance Division is responsible for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund program, including the program project priority list and intended use plan. The funds are governed by the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, Public Act 451 of 1994, Parts 52 and 53 of the Municipal Bond Authority Act, Public Act 316 of 1998, and the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, Public Law 92-500 as amended. We are here today because this is an opportunity for interested persons to present evidence and comments on the draft fiscal year 2021 intended use plan. Purpose of the public hearing. In order for program funds to be distributed, Eagle must first hear interested persons and receive comments on the draft fiscal year 2021 Clean Water State Revolving Fund intended use plan. Before Eagle can final the intended use plan, a public hearing must be held pursuant to the criteria set by the Administrative Procedures Act, Public Act 306 of 1968, as amended, and the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, Public Act 451 of 1994, Parts 52 and 53. Materials relating to the hearing topics have been distributed to all project applicants and their consulting engineers. Copies have also been mailed in response to phone requests, and these documents are on the department's website. These materials and your comments will be placed into the hearing record. The purpose of this recorded hearing is to give anyone interested in the Clean Water State Revolving Fund draft fiscal year 2021 intended use plan an opportunity to provide information that EGLE can use in finalizing this document. Please note that the fiscal year 2021 Clean Water State Revolving Loan Intended Use Plan is brought to you today as a draft document. Let me emphasize, this means that EGLE has not made a final decision on the document. Instead, it reflects an initial technical review and our belief that having the details of a draft available will help you in providing comments. Everything in the draft remains open for comment and further consideration by EGLE. EGLE will review all written and verbal comments and will address them as applicable at a later date. This public hearing is your opportunity to provide comment, but it is not meant as an opportunity for EGLE to immediately address your comments. We look forward to your input on the intended use plan. Procedures. In just a minute, I will outline the procedure we will use in taking your comments. To ensure that the hearing is conducted in a fair manner, we will follow this procedure. If you would like to make a verbal comment, you may raise your hand via the toolbar on your screen, and I will unmute your line so you can speak. If you are participating via telephone only without video, please wait until all participants on the video have spoken, and I will call for comments from those on the phone only. We will limit your comment time to 5 minutes. If you are speaking, I will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. I will do my best to address commenters in the order your hands were raised, but please bear with us as technology has challenges with doing that. I would ask that if you are not speaking, please turn off your camera and mute your line. You may also type the word comment into your question box and submit your comment. I will read aloud all comments you submit via the question box unless you state, "Do not read." How this information will be used. This hearing is being recorded, and your comments will be part of the information EGLE will consider in making its decision on the final fiscal year 2021 Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan. This document, when final, will determine the distribution of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan monies to Michigan municipalities. The public comment period will be open through the close of business on August 27, 2020 at 5 p.m. Additional information can be submitted until then. Additional information can be submitted to Kelly Green, EGLE Water Infrastructure Financing Section, P.O. Box 30457, Lansing, Michigan 48909-7957, or email at greenk1@michigan.gov. At this time, I will ask Carol Patton to provide an overview of the draft intended use plan.
Thank you, Mark. The fiscal year 2021 intended use plan was developed in accordance with Public Act 451 of 1994, Part 53, and its implementing rules. The rules establish the criteria and procedures for determining the priority rank of wastewater treatment works and non-point source projects eligible to receive financial assistance from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. For the record, the fiscal year 2021 interest rates have been established by the director at 1.85% for Clean Water State Revolving Fund 20-year loans and 2.125% for 30-year loans. It is key to note the fundable range for fiscal year 2021 is $500 million. EGLE received requests for projects totaling $325,925,000. Therefore, all projects identified for fiscal year 2021 financing will receive loan assistance if the remaining program requirements are met for each project. The draft priority list have been provided to loan applicants and their consulting engineers. along with an overview of the priority system and the draft intended use plan. I will highlight the criteria used to establish the priority lists. To qualify for ranking on the fiscal year 2021 draft project priority list, applicants were required to have filed a final project plan with the department by August 1 of this year. As required by administrative rule, the project plan had to include a transcript of the local public hearing and a copy of the municipality's resolution of adoption. For wastewater treatment projects, priority points were assigned on the basis of information contained in the final plan, as well as from pertinent monthly wastewater plant discharge monitoring reports on file with the department. Priority points are considered as specified in law and the rules in 7 areas. Number 1 is water pollution severity points. Number 2, on-site septic system points. Number 3, septic receiving points. Number 4, enforcement points. Number 5, population points. Number 6, dilution ratio points. Number 7, disadvantage points. For non-point source projects, the ranking criteria established by law and rule are: number 1, projects that address violations of water quality standards in the watershed or project area. Number 2, if the project is located in a watershed that contains high quality waters. Number 3, if the project is located in a watershed that has high public use value. Number 4, if there is high landowner or municipal willingness to participate in controlling non-point sources of pollution. And number 5, if there are ongoing local, federal, or state non-point source initiatives in the watershed or project area. The priority list also includes the assigned project number, a brief description of the project, the estimated loan amount, and the projected loan binding commitment date. I would like to emphasize that the draft project priority list was issued prior to the submittal date for the final CWSRF project plans. Therefore, projects do not have all of their possible priority points assigned. The final project priority list will contain the projects in final ranked order. Again, as the funds available for project financing far exceed the projects Eagle received, it is expected all projects meeting remaining loan requirements will receive assistance. In fiscal year 2021, Eagle is required to provide additional subsidization to qualifying projects per the requirements of the federal fiscal year 2020 capitalization grant and the Federal Clean Water Act as amended by the Water Resources Reform and Development Act and the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act. Eagle is planning to provide all additional subsidization in the form of loan principal forgiveness. Total principal forgiveness provided in fiscal year 2021 is estimated at $22,387,000. Principal forgiveness for individual applicants is based on estimated project cost provided by municipalities at the time of the draft intended use plan being published. Final principal forgiveness amounts may be adjusted at the time applicants successfully close on a loan. Eagle is proposing to allocate $18,423,600 of principal forgiveness to communities that qualified as disadvantaged per Clean Water State Revolving Fund administrative rules. Disadvantaged communities will receive principal forgiveness up to 24% of total project cost. Additionally, Eagle is proposing to allocate $3,963,400 of principal forgiveness to applicants whose projects contain qualifying green project components. Applicants with green projects will receive principal forgiveness up to 5% of the estimated total of their project that is considered green by Eagle. This hearing provides for comments on the draft intended use plan for fiscal year 2021 in accordance with Section 606 of the Clean Water Act and Section 5306, subsection 2 of Part 53, Public Act 451 of 1994. The draft plan addresses the following topics in accordance with U.S. EPA requirements. Number 1, project prioritization. Number 2, long-term and short-term program goals. Number 3, description of funds available in the program. Number 4, the criteria and method for distribution of funds. Thank you. Now I return the floor to Mark.
Thank you for your attention. And Kelly, did you have a statement you wanted to make real quick?
Yes, just to clarify, the interest rate has been set at 1.875 for 20-year loans and 2.125 for 30-year loans.
All right, thank you. I will now begin calling the names of those who have indicated they would like to make a statement. I am looking through, and Matt, if you can help me out, I am not seeing any hands raised or questions being asked.
Correct. I'm seeing the same thing.
Is there anyone on the phone that would like to make a statement?
And if you're on the phone, *9 will help raise the hand function, and *6 will mute and unmute your phone.
Well, I am still not seeing any or hearing anyone. So with that, thank you for your comments and your cooperation today. We appreciate your interest in the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and that you took the time to participate. As indicated at the beginning of the hearing, the public comment period is open through the close of business on August 27th, 2020 at 5 p.m. The hearing is now closed. Thank you again.